Welcome to the first episode of Break the Chains, Find Your Flame, hosted by the Promethean Project and myself, Steve Opolnick, the president of the Promethean Project. Today I got to sit down and talk to my little sister, Caitlin Langone, about her path to wellness, the journey she's taken, some of the missteps she's had, some of the side steps she's had to have, and really like what her passion is and what her potential or her flame has been in her path and wellness and her journey towards achieving her ideal of her potential. We had some fun talking about some of the past, how I've kind of been a pain in her butt, but also how we've helped each other grow some of our future passions together at the Promethean Project, how it's come together, and some fun stuff that we're looking for in the future. And we just generally had a really fun time talking on the podcast, digging into some of this stuff and dealing with our own nerves and laughing at each other. So I hope you enjoy, and we have more to come, and I hope that you guys hit that subscribe button at the end of this podcast so you can hear us and communicate with us.
In a world where humanity's potential is imprisoned and locked away, our only hope is to break the chains and find our flame.
What do you mean?
I need a screen.
You need a screen?
Like when you go to the priest and
Why?
confess.
Well, this is not a confession interview, so don't worry about it.
No, I'm too nervous.
All right, guys. So, welcome to the first podcast interview for Break the Chains, Find Your Flame. My guest today is Caitlin Langone, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about how she started her journey on reaching her potential, finding her flame, and we're just going to have a nice conversation and go from there. So, Caitlin, can you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Hi, guys.
Dead silence.
Right. So I am the director of outreach for the Promethean Project. And I guess I kind of got into the whole health and wellness aspect of things because of my childhood, really. I was a chubbier kid, I guess you would say. And I don't want to put this on my parents, but eating a balanced diet wasn't really part of the situation back then, part of our lifestyle.
Or education, right?
Or education, yeah. And so I didn't really get that balance between food and physical exercise. So I think that was most of the reason why I tended to become a chubbier kid. And also, I moved from a place where physical activity was something that was in my daily life. We lived on an Air Force base, so we walked a lot of places. We didn't drive too much. And then we moved up to Belchertown, and I don't know if you've ever been to Belchertown, but we lived in the middle of the woods, which made it a little hard to walk or ride our bikes anywhere. And from there, I just started to gain weight. And I started to feel really negative about myself. And it wasn't until, I guess I would say, late middle school or early high school that I wanted to make a change in that respect. My brother Steven was also at that time beginning to make a change, and I think that showed me that I could do it, and it helped to educate me on the ways to go about it. And so I made it my mission to be more physically active. Didn't really have the nutrition down at that point.
It's a tough one.
Late middle school, early high school, it's all about how your peers view you, which I don't think should be the case, but in reality, that is what a lot of people at that age think about. And for me, I didn't like how I viewed myself, so I thought everyone viewed me that way. So in finding my path, I began to make a point to exercise more. I had a friend, which I won't mention her name, but we decided we were going to join a gym. We decided we were going to start rollerblading longer distances. We had a lot of fun doing it. There's a lot of stories I could tell you, which I'll save for now. But yeah, so I went to college, obviously did some stuff that you shouldn't do. I was going to parties. I was busy all the time, stressed out all the time. So I took a little backslide there. And then it wasn't until, I would say, probably 4 or 5 years ago, I began to look at myself in a better view of myself. So I was introduced to different workout programs. I was taught through this company to eat healthier, and I learned a lot about what I should eat to fuel my body and not to diet. Before, it was always, oh, I need to not eat. I need to kind of cut back on stuff I'm eating, not necessarily eat healthier, but cut down on calories, and that obviously is not the way to go. So during this time period in my adult life, I learned that I needed to fuel my body. So I needed to put in good calories, and a lot of them actually, to couple with my physical exercise. And I started to feel better about myself. I started to do a lot of self-development. So I would read self-development books. I would listen to podcasts.
So what kind of what does that mean for the listeners out there? What is self-development?
So self-development is, some people call them self-help. I don't really like that term. I like self-development better, because we're all on a journey. We're all growing. It definitely did help me, but I think that self-help is looked at in a negative connotation. And for me, self-development means that I'm working towards a goal, not necessarily an end goal, but I'm bettering myself in the process. So there's a lot of self-development out there depending on what you want to improve on. And I did a lot of soul searching, so a lot of emotional development.
Good.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So let me just say thanks for kind of throwing some accolades towards me for your own development.
Yeah.
But I know you're sweet and you're a great sister and you're not going to throw me under the bus, but let me throw myself under the bus. That early childhood, middle school kind of negative self-image may have been just a little bit impacted by your brother and maybe a couple of your cousins.
Yep, I wasn't going to throw that out there, but I'm glad you mentioned it, because it is a big part.
And it came from a place of love most of the time.
Sure.
I mean, I think the big one is that, like, ham time kind of
Yeah, we don't need to tell everybody about ham time.
but you know, some of my own wellness journey has also been looking back at some of those things of like where, you know, because when you're in that place, what happens a lot of time is you kind of get stuck in your own head and you kind of perceive the world through your own lens, and it becomes really about like, how do I keep me safe in this situation? So some of that is deflection of like, hey, I'm chubby too, but I can make fun of my little sister for being chubby. And so like when I went through my own journey on wellness, a lot of reflection was kind of thinking back about those times, and really, you know, we've apologized about it a number of times, so we still think it's funny now with some time and some you know, thought put into it. But I do think part of my own wellness journey was looking back at that and trying to make amends to it, or at least putting that intention out there. So let me throw myself under the bus, because I know not on here you wouldn't. Anywhere else you definitely would.
Yeah.
So you said about like 4 or 5 years ago was when you really started like taking some of what you learned and really putting it back into your life.
Right. Yeah.
And that involved like learning about nutrition, which you had a really good point that we get taught, oh, dieting is the way to lose weight. And that's all about restricting calories. And if you look at it scientifically, it's calories in versus calories out, right? So like that is a formula for losing weight. But if you look at the actual specs of any diet out there, they're 2% effective, right?
Right.
Like imagine going to a doctor and they're like, hey, I want you to do this surgery, but it's only 2% effective. You should be like, no way.
Right.
Yet diet companies are a multi-million kind of business that's out there, or even billion, I would say.
Yeah.
So it is interesting when bringing some education in nutrition, and you know, there is that level that you have to meet with like calories in versus calories out, but there's also that more important level that you mentioned, which is just like the quality of what the calories are that you're putting in, growing your body, strengthening your body through that is even more important than necessarily getting to a certain weight, right?
Exactly. Nutrition is key in dieting, and I know a lot of people that don't see it that way, and they'll have their set calories for the day and they'll say, oh, if I have this cheeseburger, I'm not going to eat for the rest of the day because I met my calories.
Right.
But that's not necessarily doing your body any good. It's not really at all.
Right.
There are some good things depending on where you get the cheeseburger from. But
That's true quality of the cheeseburger. And
exactly.
So I think that brings up an interesting point too, because there are those diets out there that are you get points, right?
Right.
And calories that you have left that you were saying. And some people hoard those points throughout the day because they know they're going out drinking or they're going to go like eat
right.
a bunch of crap. And that is one, it kind of throws off your blood sugars and mood throughout the day, but it's also not a healthy way to ingest calories because then it throws off your digestion as
right.
well. So we just got really scientific in the podcast, which is not really the point of the podcast, but I think just bringing in some of that personal aspect with some of the knowledge that we both hold is really important too. So take me on the next step of that journey, right? Because you started a couple years ago, you started like learning about nutrition. What shifted with the exercise? Because I think you said an interesting thing earlier. You and your friend joined a gym, and then you decided you were going to rollerblade a lot, which I know was hard out here,
Yeah.
like on the muddy driveway at our parents' house. So we talked about educating on nutrition. Did you also start an education on like wellness through physical activity or exercise programming or?
So yeah, so I started out really getting into running, and if anyone knows me, I'm not a great runner.
Still better than Marcus, who we'll bring on later in a different podcast.
He'll probably deny that, but I did beat him the last run we went, so we'll just go from there. But yeah, I started running a lot. It was nice because at that time, my brother Steven also was running, so it was really good to have that support system and have someone to talk to about that. We went on runs together. We did a half marathon together.
We did crazy like training for that. I think one of the last long runs we went on was on a bike path to Amherst, and it was, I think it was snowy out. It was,
there was like 8 inches of snow on the bike path that we were running through.
That was an intense run.
Yeah.
We've also had a couple intense bike rides.
Oh, yeah, we did. The Opalniks like to do things in the elements, so we like to work out when it's pouring or there's a windstorm or it's snowing. Not on purpose, but we have those goals set and we need to accomplish them.
Yeah, there've been a number of those, which I think like we'll get into later. Some of the mud runs we've done. Yeah. It's right in our element.
Making fitness fun is what it's all about, and we definitely don't lack in that.
No. So you started with running.
Yeah, so I started with running, and then I realized it wasn't making me happy like I thought it was going to. And so for a while I started trying to make my own programs, my fitness programs, and a lot of it was about losing weight for me at that point. And then I realized that I wasn't getting anywhere when I was making my own programs. So this company that I started to do fitness programs through had it all laid out for me. It had not necessarily what to eat, but it had my goals in each aspect of the food pyramid. So I found that when everything was laid out in front of me is where I would see success. And from that, from having the calendar and what I needed to accomplish and how I needed to do it and what I needed to eat to fuel my body, I started seeing results. And that's where my transformation kind of took a different turn. I wanted to be healthier, not necessarily lose weight. I wanted to be able to have the strength and the ability to go about my daily tasks, but also to be able, I don't know how to say this, I don't know, it gave me endurance. It gave me the ability to get out in the world and to climb mountains and to go on those long walks, whereas before I would fatigue pretty easily. So at that point, it became more about strength and increasing my endurance. And I kind of, while finding my way in that aspect, began to lose the weight that I wanted to lose. I mean, it's still something I struggle with. I would say my view of myself is definitely more positive at this point,
Right.
but I've worked a lot to get there. But it's still not, I have doubts about myself, I guess, when it comes to my physical appearance as well as my emotional state. But I'm working on it. And that's what the journey is all about.
Right.
Finding your flame. And I think I found mine.
Nice. And just for those listeners who don't know, Caitlin recently just had a kid, a beautiful boy.
Yep, Lincoln.
Lincoln. And so I think that's a natural kind of state where, you before you got pregnant, you were really focused on fitness. You were doing really well. You got pregnant, you were still doing it. And then sometimes even after the birth, you get that grace period where you're not allowed to do anything physically active for about 6 weeks?
Yeah, that was very hard for me.
And for someone who's like on that journey and really, battling that physical activity, really wanting to have endurance, especially with a new kid, and then just that mental state and self-image, that is a natural period where there's going to be a lot of reflection. And it sounds like you kind of came through that really strong still and motivated.
Yeah, it was really hard for me not to be active, especially because I do have those views of myself. But having a baby is definitely worth it. Every time I look at him, I'm like, oh, it's okay. But that kind of gets back into when I transformed my view of physical exercise into strength and endurance. When I look at him, I want to be strong for him. I want to be able to run around with him and not be exhausted. Right. I want to bring him out into the world and do things where normal people might fatigue, but because I'm doing this on a daily basis, I'll be able to give him the life that I want to provide for him.
Right. Plus, you have the Opala games coming up, which this might get referenced a couple times on this podcast, but a long time ago when my wife was pregnant, even before, we had this conversation between the siblings about when we have kids and when they're older, we're going to create this Olympic-style gaming system once a year where our kids will compete against each other. And it's kind of in jest, but I think all of us are kind of prepping the kids for it just in case.
Oh, it's definitely happening. It's kind of like American Ninja Warrior style,
true,
except in the woods and with kids.
That really doesn't sound positive.
No, that does not.
Hard and fast, like we're like, you better do this. It's just,
no.
It's a fun competition just to kind of see.
I think we decided that we have 2 older nieces that actually just turned 19 and 23.
It's crazy.
And we decided that they were going to be the coaches for the little ones. So I think it could be a fun time, for sure.
And my daughter is turning 4, and Lincoln is 2 months?
2 months.
2 months. And Aurelis is 7 months. So they are getting stronger and making some headway on that progress. So there's a couple. So thank you for sharing your story about that path on wellness. Can you talk a little bit? I mean, I know the story, but so we have the nonprofit, the wellness center that we're building. Can you talk a little bit about your buy-in on that and what kind of led to come together with me and Marcus and talking about that?
Yeah. So in my journey that I've discussed thoroughly, I started to want to teach others about what I was learning. And I became certified in I don't know what you would call it.
You can use the name. It's fine.
Well, I became certified in PIO, which for you guys out there that don't know what PIO is, it is a Beachbody program. And it was designed by Chalene Johnson, who is great. I love her. And it kind of incorporates yoga moves, but it's more fast-paced. So it's more for flexibility, strength, and cardio, which I guess yoga kind of is as well. But it does incorporate a lot of Pilates into it. So you're constantly moving. It is very fast-paced, and it's done to music. And I fell in love with it, and I wanted to teach other people, and I became certified in PIO, and I have my group fitness certification as well. And I actually did get a health coach certification, which is great. For those of you that don't know what a health coach is, it's more of a mentor, I like to think of it. We obviously aren't trained in certain aspects of health, but we refer you to who you need to go to. So it's not like we're gonna give you a diet plan or a fitness plan, but we're there to support you in your journey, which I think is really important, especially in the community. So with all these certifications, my brother came up to me and he asked me if I wanted to be a part of the Promethean Project. And obviously at that point, I was going in that direction anyway. So with everything that I learned and wanting to teach, I thought this would be a great opportunity for me to get involved. I think we have a lot of good ideas that are coming in the future, hopefully near future. And a big portion of that, I think, is education. And there's not enough education out there on health and wellness. There are a lot of aspects that people overlook or just kind of shrug off. And I think if we can start educating people on health benefits and what they can do to progress in their journey, I think that's really important, and hopefully create a community that I don't know. A community. So hopefully create a community that views health and wellness as a priority.
Right, so like a community around wellness and education of what wellness is, instead of just like, hey, here's this fad diet. Hey, you should exercise this way. Hey, here's intermittent fasting. Hey, here's, there's a bunch of, the market's saturated with all that stuff. And I think, just from our point of view, it's like getting that education and building supports in a natural setting is going to do way more than just a fitness fad or like Nutrisystem or anything of that nature.
Exactly. Actually, one of my goals is, which hopefully I will be doing in the near future, is to obtain my youth exercise specialist certification. And I think that's really where we should start, is with our children. They need to, you see a lot of kids these days that they look at their parents, and their parents don't necessarily realize that they're always watching. And so depending on the family dynamic, sometimes that's really negative on a child. And so if we can get them and educate them on being good to themselves, being healthy, and creating good habits right from the start, I think that is really important too.
Right, and that even goes back to both of our own kind of journeys through life where as kids we weren't really aware of that, and we weren't really sure what was healthy, what was, and again, nothing on our parents, but it's just our own miseducation about that. And it not just like, hey, eat this because it's good for you, but hey, eat this because it'll make you feel better. Hey, be active because it'll make you feel better and make you live that positive life that you want, instead of where you're just like, why is this not happening for me? Because for me, a lot of times I'd be stuck in that cycle of, hey, I feel crappy because of my weight or how I look or my self-image. And then I'd be like, I'm going to do something about it. And then I'd have like one day of like good activity and eating. And then the next day I'd be like, oh, I can eat half this French bread as a snack. And then I would eat it and it would make me feel really good because it produces serotonin and it helps.
For a little while, though.
For
right?
a little while, yeah. It's that cycle of like, oh, I feel good. And then that dread comes in like, what did I just do?
Right.
Right. And it cycles through. And it's a hard cycle to break without education or support
Right.
around it. So.
And stress is a huge factor of that. Earlier downstairs, I was stressed out, not because of this podcast, for some other things going on in my life.
Not all because of the podcast.
Maybe a little bit. And my brother was asking me questions to prepare me for this stressful event, and I had blueberries in my hand, and I was just constantly eating them. I mean, I will say they were blueberries, and they were portioned out, so it's not like I did damage to my self-esteem, but I was definitely stress eating, and that's not healthy at all.
Right, and I think an important thing we could always get into later too is mindful eating, right?
Right.
You weren't really being present when you were eating because you were stressed out. And
Exactly.
that's a big thing for me. I always think like slowing down and really tasting your food, and we're all victims of not doing it because we have somewhere to go or something to do, or you just want to get through it so you can get to the next thing of relaxation after dinner or whatever it is. But sometimes it's really important to be like, hey, I didn't actually taste any of these blueberries,
Right.
or hey, I didn't actually taste what my meal tasted like. We have this kind of schema in our head of what this construct of what the dinner tastes like, and we're just like,
Yeah.
and then it's like, oh yeah, that was good, and we're like, but was it really? Did you actually taste that? Like, did you taste the flavors in that, or you're just like, hey, it's a pork chop and a baked potato, I know what that tastes like.
That is something I am guilty of. You guys don't know this, but I am an ICU nurse for an emergency veterinary hospital, and we do not get a lot of time to eat, so I am very guilty of eating very quickly, and it's something that I try to work on. And I have to tell myself to slow down, and I think sometimes I hear Steve's voice in my head telling me to mindful eat, and I just kind of laugh it off, and I focus more on what I'm doing.
Right. Well said. I will say throughout this whole interview, so the Apollonics have this thing when they get nervous that their skin gets really blotchy.
Oh,
and,
good.
And I would say at the beginning, Caitlin's like face and neck was just crimson red, but she's toned it down a little bit. She's nice and pale, just like all Apollonics are. And she's doing good. So just a couple more things, and I know we both have stuff we have to do pretty soon. So just a couple more questions I'd like to ask you, and some input I'd like to get back from you. But before I ask those, I meant to say this earlier. When we started the Promethean Project, it was really funny because for years we had been talking about merging all of our interests in this one building so Caitlin, has animal science background and works in emergency vet situations. And our brother Marcus, who you'll learn more about, does martial arts and has lived in Taiwan for a number of years. And, I've always been on, my own health and wellness journey, but also I'm a mental health counselor. And so very early on, we were like, hey, wouldn't it be awesome if we had this one building where I could do my counseling, Marcus could do his martial arts, and Caitlin would do like
Therapy
animals and that's kind of happening in the sense of the nonprofit. I actually one of our mentors in a program we're doing to kind of build the business asked me I think the first week was like, hey, you guys thinking about doing therapy animals at all? And I was like, funny you should say that. And I went right into that story. And it's kind of funny that like we've perpetuated this idea, and then it's actually coming true, and it's very, very awesome. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity, and just for Marcus and you for buying into my pitch about about the nonprofit.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that we all look at as a priority, and it's something we've all struggled with, even Marcus through his own journey, which you'll hear about later.
Man, we're really pimping out Marcus in this episode.
I know.
I think it's really good.
Hopefully he lives up to the hype.
Yeah, that's going to be trouble. So, Marcus, when you're listening to this, take some notes and get ready, because we're coming. All right, so my questions are twofold, and we can kind of branch off of this. The first question, and what you guys will learn, is we're all a bunch of geeks. We love superheroes, we love sci-fi, we love Firefly. Actually, one of those bike rides we alluded to earlier in the podcast that was crazy was to actually go get Serenity, which is the movie version of Firefly.
And we have a picture of us.
Yeah, we accomplished our goal. There were torrential like downpours and wind.
Lightning.
And we almost got hit by branches coming off trees.
Yeah, we have a picture of us soaked in the car with Firefly.
Maybe I'll attach the picture to when we post the podcast.
Oh yeah, that'd be cool.
And it was actually on the same path that we ran in the snow. It was the same bike path that we ran on.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the misnomer there, is that it's not necessarily when we hang out, it's where we hang out.
No, we ran in the snow in Springfield too.
Yeah, that's true. All right, so anyways, the question is, the setup for this was we're geeky, right? And some of the questions we're going to ask throughout the podcast are associated with that geekiness. So the first question I want to ask Caitlin is, if you could have any superpower, assuming that superpowers are a real thing, what would be your superpower? Not real? Well, we can get into that with the next question. But like, so if you could have any superpower that kind of exists in the geekdom of like Marvel and Image and DC.
I'm surprised you said DC.
There's a reason why it was last. What would that superpower be, and why?
Oh, let me think. So I guess I kind of have two. I can't really decide which one I would want more.
I'll allow you two. You're the first interview.
Right.
So you get two. Maybe other people can only have one. I'll play around with it.
So enhanced senses. I mean, I gotta throw my boy Spidey some props. But enhanced senses, I think I would like that. You always know what people are feeling. You're alerted to danger before it happens. It kind of gives you time to react appropriately. And, I mean, Spider-Man's pretty awesome with his Spidey sense.
It's pretty cool.
Right? And then you have Daredevil also. He's pretty great.
Both are good guys.
I'm trying not to swear. It's really hard when you talk about comics.
Well, I'm okay with swearing on here as long as it's appropriate. So comics is always appropriate to swear, I think.
Well, now the time has passed.
Yeah.
So.
Stay tuned to her next interview where it'll all be swears.
And then the other one that I would like having is intangibility.
Ooh, interesting.
Which I feel like helps in more ways than one. It keeps me safe. So intangibility, objects can pass through me, right? And
Kitty Pryde up in
yeah,
there.
Kitty Pryde. And I think that helps both to keep me safe, right? Keep me alive. But also, it lets all those negative comments go right through me. So it helps me to not hold on to things, or it would help me to not hold on to things had I have this.
Which in our prep for the earlier thing is one of Caitlin's weaknesses, is letting go of things.
Yeah, I have a problem with letting go. I dwell on things too much.
So like a mental intangibility with the physical intangibility.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I've never really thought of it that way, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I don't know. I still think enhanced senses might be over that.
Yeah, enhanced senses is a good superpower to have. And really being in control of that, right?
Right.
So like Spidey, Wolverine-esque.
Yeah, that'd be kick-ass. There you go.
Oh, it came in! Another great
Sorry,
comic.
Mom.
Another great comic, if you ever want to pick it up, is Kick-Ass. It's a fun comic to read.
Oh, it definitely is.
Much better than the movie.
Yes, I was going to say, those of you that have seen the movie, throw that out of your mind.
Although the movie has both of the Quicksilvers in it, right? Because the guy that plays Kick-Ass was Quicksilver in the MCU.
Does.
And
it
then
does.
his friend, I can't remember his friend's name, was the guy that played Quicksilver in the X-Men universe.
I don't know if we should have these questions at the end. We're just going to turn into comic talk.
Yeah. Well,
This is the comic podcast.
This is the end. Each end of the podcast will end with like a comic talk. All right. So the last question, because we both have to get going on with our daily lives, not our superhero lives, but our
Oh, man.
alter ego lives. So we talked about like MCU, DC image superpowers, but what do you think are actual superpowers that you have in real life?
So, I think I'm going to kind of combine that with comic superpowers.
Okay.
And bear with me, don't laugh at first. I think that my superpower would be teleportation. And I understand that's not physically possible. You're probably like, then what is going on here?
Mm-hmm.
But if you spin it this way, so I pride myself on being there for other people. I think that I make that a priority, and I am always there. If someone needs me, I will change my plans or drop what I'm doing if someone's in a crisis. And I know that's not exactly teleportation, but I feel like it kind of encompasses that. Because I'm where I need to be for someone else. If someone needs me, I'm there.
Yeah.
I'm bamfing right over there.
Bamfing right over there, yeah. I mean, so it's almost like an empath teleportation that you got going on, right? Like,
yeah, kind of.
Yeah, I like that. I like that spin on it, and I'm glad that we could work the word "bamf" into our first podcast, because that's amazing. You don't hear that too often in there.
Bamf is a good action word.
I think the only problem with it is the smell of like brimstone. That's the negative. I mean, like the purple flash, that's cool.
The smell.
The sound is
much.
cool. Smells not so much. All right. Well, thank you, Caitlin. I know you were nervous about it. I think you did a great job. I'll edit it up to make it sound like super professional as much as I can. Some stuff I'm going to leave in there because I'm your older brother, and we know I like to pick on you.
Well, at least we didn't talk about ham time.
We did actually talk about
but no one knows what that means.
Right. Send an email to us at info@theprometheanproject.org if you want to know what ham time means. You thought I was pitching the podcast. No. I will pitch the podcast at the end of this recording. But again, Caitlin, thanks for coming in. It was an honor to interview you, and you did great. So
thanks for having me.
All right. You might be on again. It depends how well received this is. And look forward to our next podcast, which will involve the infamous Marcus O'Polonick.
Will he live up to the hype?
Dun, dun, dun.
You can reach us at our website, theprometheanproject.org, or you can send an email to info@theprometheanproject.org. We look forward to sharing more with you and hearing more from you. So until next time, remember, the most important step in wellness and health is the next one.